The podcast.
And we're live. Okay, welcome to the podcast. This is John. Felix, how are you doing?
I'm good, yeah.
And who do we have today, Felix?
We have Thomas doing a segment on teased tangents.
Yes. Thomas, how are you?
Good, how are you?
Very psyched. Are you pumped for today's tangent?
Oh, big time. You know yourself.
Naturally. I couldn't sleep a wink last night. I guess we'll get right into it, will we? So, Thomas, go ahead.
Yeah, I will. Today I'm going to talk about Fermat's last theorem. Fermat's last theorem is probably the most famous maths problem that's been around forever, really. It was come up by this guy called Fermat in the mid 1600s, and ever since, mathematicians and anyone that's been any interest in maths have been obsessed with it ever since. So what the theorem is, it's like the Pythagorean theorem that we've all done in school, x squared plus y squared equals z squared. And with that theorem, there's like certain numbers, like there's certain numbers called Pythagorean triples,
Right.
like 3, 4, and 5. If you put those in for x, y, and z, like they're all integers and they work.
What's an integer?
An integer is any whole number that's positive.
Okay, cool.
So like 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, off into infinity.
Okay. Positive or negative or just positive?
Well, there can be negative integers as well. I was wrong there.
Okay, cool. So when I was looking up this guy Fermat, I found a little factoid that prior to it being proved, it was in the Guinness Book of Records as the most difficult mathematical problem.
Yeah.
Because of the large sum of unsuccessful proofs.
Yeah, that's very true. And the reason why there's so many unsuccessful proofs is because of all the rewards that were offered for it. There was so many rewards offered for this proof because so many people were obsessed with it. This famous German mathematician and industrialist offered a prize of, I think it was 100,000 German gold coins,
Wow.
which was like loads of money back then.
Yeah.
The French some institute of science in France back in the 1800s also had another prize. So there was definitely a money motivator behind people being interested in it.
Okay, so basically, tell me if I'm wrong, but the theorem is like, so you have your triangle with a right angle, and the square of the two sides add up to the square of the longest side. Is that correct?
That's Pythagorean theorem. Fermat's theorem is slightly different.
And this guy is saying that you can only do that for the numbers 1 and 2.
Yeah, only for like squared.
Yeah.
He says you can't do it when you get to cubes or any other shapes that are like to the power, like any other theoretical shapes that are in like 4D, 5D, etc.
Right. Okay.
Right now, Thomas, I was looking at this as well, and one thing that really stuck out to me was the fellow who came up with this, Fermat, he didn't seem to show us any proof of how this was the case. He didn't seem to prove his point. It seemed I think I read that he just wrote it down. He wrote down in the margin of a book that he could not fit the proof in there, and that's what led to years of just people not knowing what it was. Is that true, or?
Yeah, that's completely true. Fermat was a bit of a troll. He'd come up with these proofs, and he'd send them off and publish them. And he'd never show anyone how he'd done it. He just told them it was possible to do.
Yeah, it's the perfect cop-out. He's like, I have done this. It's just too long for me to write out.
Yeah, exactly. No one actually knows if he actually did prove it or not back in the 1600s. No one can know. That's
what I was going to say, because the fella who eventually did prove it used techniques in math that weren't prevalent and weren't discovered until well after Fermat has died. So the question is still kind of there. It's not that this fellow Wiles has figured out what Fermat's proof was. He has created his own proof for it. So we don't know.
Exactly.
So
there could still be a simpler way still out there.
Yeah,
do it.
exactly.
True.
Or no other way. And the guy was just spoofing. you know?
Yeah.
A lot of
So-
people think that Fermat was actually wrong in his proof in the first time, but he was never wrong before that, which is why people are unsure.
Yeah. So you dropped Andrew Wiles. You name dropped Andrew Wiles there, Felix. So Thomas, I'm correct in saying that he was the first guy to actually prove this theorem. Is that correct?
Yeah, first guy to successfully prove it. He's probably, after he proved it, he was the most famous, and probably still is one of the most famous mathematicians at the moment. He was on the front cover of Time magazine and everything, and got hundreds of thousands of euro in prize money.
Yeah, no, it was 700 grand in euros was the
Wow.
prize
Yeah.
we got. Like, that's crazy amount of money for a discovering a proof, right?
It is. It is.
And Thomas, like, what made it so difficult? Like, why did it take so long for people to prove this theorem?
Yeah, like he's already kind of a successful mathematician, and he decided to work on this in secret because he didn't want anyone else to beat him to this proof and get the money or the recognition. So what he did is he worked for this for 8 years in secret.
Wow.
At his home, and then he sent this kind of email out to all these mathematicians, and he said he's going to do a lecture. He never said he was going to prove Fermat's theorem, and he went to Cambridge and he told them he was going to do this lecture, and his lecture went on for days, and it was only on the last day, at the end of the last lecture, he said, and that's the proof for Fermat's last theorem.
Wow.
And like everyone
Oh,
was
yeah.
completely shocked
Blown
because he
away.
never said it. Yeah.
That's chills, like.
That's such a
Yeah.
king move, you know?
Yeah.
That's really good.
It is. It's like the dropping the mic, like.
Like, I was reading, he only like told his wife that he was working on it, and
Yeah.
for the time that he was working on it, so people wouldn't get suspicious, he released papers that he had written up like previously before he started working on it. So like small little mathematical papers, he'd release them like over the course of the few years, so that people would still think he was just doing like nothing special, like.
Yeah, you had to throw people off the scent. People would like ask him, "Oh, what's he getting up to?" and stuff, and you'd have to like spoof and like
There's a lot
talk
of-
about stuff he's worked on years ago. Like
There's a lot of pranksters in the world of mathematics, like.
there is. Someone actually, there was another big prank before Andrew Wiles had done it. Someone on April Fool's Day wrote that they had actually proved the theorem and that it was very simple, only 2 or 3 lines. And that email got like copy and pasted and forwarded so many times that it was like starting to be sent around after April Fool's Day. And then all of these mathematicians like came. It said in the email that they had proved it, and he would show them all in Cambridge on a certain date, and they all came to Cambridge, and everyone was like, "What are you doing? Like, there's no actual proof it was a prank."
Oh, man.
That's good. And what other kind of attempts were there at this proof? Like, are there any other notable attempts at it or interesting attempts?
Yeah, well, like you see, this proof is really something that's gone on for 400 years. People have been doing it, and everyone that's done it has built on each other. They realized almost right early on, like in the 1700s, that you only had to prove it for prime numbers, because like there's infinitely many solutions to this, and you just have to find one that disproves it, and you have it. But there's so many ways to do that. But they realized you only need to prove it for prime numbers, because every other number is a combination of prime numbers. Like if you think of any other number, you can just make that number up with other prime numbers.
Right.
So they discovered that early on.
Okay. Yeah.
You know, something interesting as well, John, is you were talking there about loads of different people who have come up with proofs that have been told they're wrong, right? They've been denied.
Yeah.
One of those people was in fact Wiles. He came up with a proof in 1993, and an error was found in it, and he had to bring in a student of his to come up with the proper proof that was later released in 1995, for which he got his
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. And Thomas, were you telling me about before we went on air? Were you saying something about a guy in Japan who had a go?
Yeah.
Had a go at it.
There was these two very good friends. This guy called Taniyama and his other best friend Shimura, and they were like really good mathematicians. And they started working on something completely unrelated to Fermat's last theorem. They were working on these like things called elliptical curves, which basically look like lava. If you were to graph a lava lamp, that's what it, you know, the like blobs. It's like if you're graphing those blobs. And another area of maths, and like complete opposite. And they like joined them together. And Taniyama and Shimura were like, oh, if we join these together, like we think they're the same, but they couldn't actually prove it. But they became so obsessed with it that Taniyama actually killed himself when he was really young. He was only 31. So like this theorem has definitely thrown many by the wayside over the years.
Yeah, definitely. So Andrew Wiles, is he still alive?
He is. He's still alive to this day. He's still riding that win.
When did he prove it?
Like say again?
When did he prove it? What year?
It was mid-1990s, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, okay, 1995, okay. I think.
Right. He's
Andrew
living it up. Like.
Wiles, yeah. One of his big there was kind of a race against the clock. And he wanted to get it done before he was 40 because there's this prize called the Fields Medal, and like all the notable mathematicians get it. And you have to be under 40 when the Fields Medal convention, when they meet to decide it. So when Felix was saying there how the first time Andrew Wiles came up with it, there was a problem, and it was a pretty complex problem, and he was actually young enough then to get it, and it was a like desperate race against the clock then to get it in time before so he could get the Fields Medal, but he actually missed the Fields Medal by a few months.
Such bad luck. Yeah,
that's a killer.
But it was kind of fine because they were like, oh, they like gave him a like plaque. And he has his name on like a plaque in Germany with all these other mathematicians, and he's the first mathematician to have a platinum plaque. So he like definitely got recognized. Plus his 650 grand he got, or 700 grand.
Yeah.
Well, there you go. So do you have anything else to say, or is that tease tangents for today?
I think that's really most of it. That's kind of most of the story behind it. There's a really good book I read on it called Fermat's Last Theorem, if anyone else is interested in reading on it further.
Yeah, because a lot of people, I think, find maybe mathematics a bit daunting to kind of read into and a bit boring. But like, yeah, it's the people inside it that are really interesting, like Mr. Fermat himself. And
not only that, but this problem it's like described publicly as a treasure hunt. Right, like a phrase you wouldn't really equate with mathematics, you know. But people, like you said, people have died trying to figure out this puzzle, you know.
Yeah.
So it's
very true.
It's an exciting story,
and there's a lot of bank to be made from just doing a few sums, like, as we've discovered today. There sure is.
700 grand, you know.
Yeah. And on that note, I think that's a good note to end on.
Yeah.
So Thomas, aka T, thanks very much for coming in today, and
thanks for having me,
bringing us on a wonderful tangent. And Felix, do you have any last remarks?
No, just thanks a million for coming on, and we hope you come on in the future.
Yeah, and what's that book? What's that book again, Thomas?
Fermat's Last Theorem. By Simon Singh or Singh.
Something like that.
Yeah.
We'll let people figure that out. Okay. All right.
That's their own treasure hunt.
Yeah, and so it begins. There probably won't be 700,000 euros. Okay. All right. We'll wrap it up there. Thanks very much, Thomas. And this has been the podcast. Hello, and thank you for listening to the podcast. I hope you enjoyed this episode. We have one minor correction from the episode. Andrew Wiles was awarded a silver plaque from the International Mathematical Union rather than a platinum plaque. So once again, thank you very much for listening, and we hope you tune in again.